Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live webinar. Thank you so much for being here. If you're catching the recording, thank you so much for being here as well. We really appreciate it. In this session with NextAdvisor, we're talking all about Series I bonds for the next hour. Series I bonds are exciting. They're going through a really exciting time. If you need the quick 60-second catch up, inflation is at a 40-year high in the United States and all around the world. You've probably noticed that when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the gas station, when you look at your 401k, a whole bunch of other things around us showing the effects of really high inflation. And what many money experts say is that inflation will persist for several more months. And for those of us who have a checking account, a savings account, or money stored away in something like a certificate of deposit, something like that, we're coming out with negative gains. We're actually coming out with losses because inflation is so strong right now. All right. And so we're going to talk through a magical bond that you can purchase that has an incredible rate of return right now. I bonds have a 9.62 rate of return, and that rate is only going to be good through the end of October. So our objective is that you feel fully informed after today on what to do if you want to purchase an I bond, if you want to lock in that 9.62% rate. We're also going to be taking questions all throughout. We've got Alex Gailey from NextAdvisor as well hanging out in the chat. I'll be asking questions. I will be our moderator, but the true star of the show, I am Michelle. She is Beyonce by far in this setting. Rita-Soledad, Ferrnández, Paulino. For people who don't know, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rita-Soledad Ferrnández Paulino. You can call me Soledad. I am the founder of Wealth para Todos, a financial education platform and coaching platform that is geared to making sure that more Black, Indigenous people of color, women, and LGBTQ plus folk have a financial plan to retire early. I want us to self-care our way to financial freedom. A lot of times we grow up in a culture and families where we think that we need to hustle, that we need to sacrifice our wellness in order to build wealth. And I'm here to tell you all that doesn't have to be our truth. We can change the narrative around wealth building.
When it comes specifically to the topic that we're talking about today, Series I bonds, we have a deck that we'll hop into in just a moment. We're taking questions all throughout in the chat. Please chat us any and all questions. But I guess before we even dive into that, what do you notice comes up for people when they're looking at something like a Series I bond? They're starting to hear about it in the news. They're like, oh, I've never even heard of this investment before. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is, who it's for, some of the kind of high level takeaways on it?
Yeah, so Series I bond didn't become a thing until 1998. And so for a lot of you in this chat, if this is the first time you're hearing about Series I bonds, it might be because you didn't have parents who purchased Series I bonds, right? So much of what we believe is safe and comfortable is a reflection of what we've been exposed to. So if you're following NextAdvisor, if you're on that newsletter list, if you're following personal finance content creators like myself, then you are going to hear about Series I bonds. And yet there's going to be that part of you that feels like, wait, is this a good idea? Is this the same as Forex? Is someone going to start sending me a bunch of bots? It's important for y'all to know that Series I bonds are a security that you buy directly from the US government. And it protects you from inflation. And so if you're having those feelings of like, this is unfamiliar to me, that's okay. We're here to educate you about that. And I think it's going to be very comforting for you to see that the only place you could purchase Series I bonds is at TreasuryDirect.gov. It is a government website. And that should also feel a lot safer than perhaps when you start investing in a Roth IRA or a taxable brokerage account.
Amazing. I know that you've got some prepared slides for us, so I can definitely let you take it away on that. Feel free to share. And while you're doing that, everyone, we had so many jokes planned for how old the Treasury Direct website is. We were like, ooh, we're going to crush this. This is going to be like a comedy set. And then on Monday, the website got updated. It's a brand new website on Treasury Direct. And so all of these jokes, I was like, ooh, you're going to hammer and chisel your username and password into the site, and then you can buy an I bond, and it have to flush all those down the drain. They absolutely knew. That just shows how much the buzz is being there. The government is in action with a website refresh. That never happens, right? So know that on top of all of this exciting momentum with the interest rates and things like that, they have recently done a rebrand, and it is easier to purchase I bonds if that ends up being the right financial decision for you. So just FYI, even some extra fuel for the I bond fire. So why don't you take it away? What are some of the high level things we need to know about I bonds?
Yes. Okay. So just in case anybody wants to see my beautiful family, this is a picture of us. My husband is Dominican American. I have a 7-year-old non-binary child and a 4-year-old son, and we are building wealth in expensive Southern California. So we're going to be talking about everything that you guys already know that advertised in the webinar. These are the different topics, and there are some points here that I have slides for, others that I just really want to be responding to your questions. I really want this to be a time for you to ask specific questions, things that perhaps haven't been covered on the NextAdvisor website, on the various articles on Serie I bonds. Let's make sure that you get all the answers to those questions today. And a reminder that the material provided during this workshop should be used for informational purposes only, and in no way should be relied upon for financial advice. It's important that you consult with your own financial advisor when making decisions regarding your financial management. So we hope that you take all of this information and then decide what's best for you, and then consult with somebody. Okay, so what are Serie I saving bonds? The key thing I want you all to remember here is that I should remind you of inflation. So a Serie I savings bond is you're lending the money to the US government. They're borrowing money from you, and in return, they're going to pay you interest. And that interest rate can change. It's based on two things: a fixed interest rate, and then also based on an inflation rate. So right now in 2022, that we see such a high inflation rate, that is impacting the rate on the Serie I bonds. So these bonds are a great protection for your dinero. It protects your money from inflation. And they're only available to purchase at TreasuryDirect.gov. You cannot purchase Serie I bonds in a taxable brokerage account. You can't purchase them within a Roth IRA account. You have to go to TreasuryDirect.gov and buy these individual Serie I bonds.
I think it's also important to note, I know something that when we did an interview a couple of weeks ago, you shared with me that I was like, oh, there's really some urgency here, is that this I bond rate, it gets calculated every 6 months. And the 6 months are not really, it's not January 1st and July 1st. It's kind of an unusual cadence. I believe it's November 1st, which is part of why we're having this session in October. And then I believe May 1st is the other one. And so at different times, depending on when in the year you purchase the I bond, you'll actually end up potentially locking in a different rate. Just something good to keep in mind, perhaps add to whatever your notes are for your own personal finance organization. November 1st and May 1st, those are the 2 times of the year. That's correct, Sol, right? November 1st.
Yes, that is correct. And so right now until October 31st, you can buy Serie I bonds for an interest rate of 9.62%. November 1st, we'll find out a new rate. And it is very possible, if inflation goes down, that we're also going to have a lower interest rate on the Serie I bonds. However, it's still going to be a higher amount than in your high yield savings accounts. So right now we see high yield savings accounts that may have a 2% interest rate, or I've even seen one with 4%, right? There's certificate of deposits that might be around that. And I personally believe that November 1st, when the new rate is determined, it's possibly going to be lower than 9.62%, but it's still going to be a lot higher than what you can get in a high yield savings account or a certificate of deposit. So again, why buy Serie I bonds? It's always going to be to protect your money from inflation. If you go to this government website, you'll see that we have here an inflation calculator, and you can calculate how much your money is worth, money that you had saved in 2000 or in 2006, how much the buying power is now. And that's so important, because we all have family members that may just be keeping money in their house, which really means the value is decreasing to inflation. We have family members that might feel comfortable keeping it in a bank account, but a bank savings account is not going to give you the same interest rate as a high yield savings account. And even if you have your money in a high yield savings account or in a certificate of deposit, with inflation rates being so high right now, you're still losing the value of your money. So I wanted to show you all this government website for inflation. because I want you to calculate the buying power of your money.
Terrific. We have a few questions that are coming in. So Louis or Louis, he talks about the Yada banking app offering an easier way of putting money into an iBonds bucket. I think this kind of brings up a broader question. We see some banks making efforts in terms of offering specific accounts that would be unique to iBonds, sort of jumping on the iBond bandwagon. Is TreasuryDirect the only place you can purchase an actual iBond? Are you able to purchase one through your bank? What does that look like?
That is a great question. Yeah, I don't know if you noticed that right away. I was like, hey, what? I definitely want to look into that more and read all of the fine print, because once again, Series I bonds are only available for purchase on the TreasuryDirect.gov website. And I have seen people tell me, oh, I'm investing in a Roth IRA with my bank. And then it turns out what they have is a Roth savings account. And that money isn't being invested in assets such as ETFs or stocks or index funds. And so they're not seeing this high rate of return compared to other people who might have their money invested in a Roth IRA. So thank you for asking that question. I want you to go back and read the fine print to make sure, what is it really referring to? A lot of times we've seen this. We see financial institutions that see things that are popular and they want to say, oh, people already know about this, let's draw them in. And like I said, I have clients who thought they were investing in a Roth IRA, and it turns out they just had Roth savings accounts and the money was not growing.
Important to know. We have several questions coming in on which interest rate applies when, which I think is kind of one of the biggest Q&As. So Stephanie asked, if you buy at the current rate and then it gets announced that the rate's going to be lower on November 1st, which interest rate is applying to my bond? Marguerite also asked, if you buy the iBond now, is that 9.62% rate locked in for the life of the bond for as long as you hold it? Can you give us a quick once-over of what interest rate you're actually getting and for how long you're actually getting that interest rate when it comes to iBonds?
Yes, these are great questions. So your interest rate is locked in for 6 months only. So if you purchase a Series I bond on October 30th, you're going to have the 9.62% interest rate for 6 months. And November 1st, when the new interest rate is revealed, then your bond is going to get that other interest rate for the following 6 months. Does that
Amazing.
make sense?
Yep. Then after that 6 months, then what rate does it become?
Whatever rate is set from November 1st to May 1st. It's going to be the interest rate that you're earning on a monthly basis on your Series I bond. And something else to keep in mind is that I bonds, the interest is not compounded on a monthly basis. So the balance, the principal value of your Series I bond is going to be the same for 6 months. And you're not going to see it changing until every 6 months. And when I say changing, I'm talking about the balance being compounded and that interest being added. And then when you get that new interest rate, you're getting an interest on the balance plus the interest that you earned in the first 6 months.
Yep. So it sounds like as long as you purchase in the 6 month period that there is a certain rate, you are going to get 6 months at that rate, no matter where in the period you purchased. So someone who purchases now, they're thrilled. They're ending their Wednesday night on the East Coast on TreasuryDirect.gov, buying their iBond, right? So that's going to be locked in through April 2023 at the 9.62 rate. We don't know what's going to happen. Another question came in. So Nicole asked directly to us, when did they release the next interest rate? So October 13th is when they're going to announce September inflation numbers. And then they'll have the 6 month period, the 6th month of that complete. And so lucky us in media, it's a race to who can calculate the next interest rate first before they announce it. They usually announce it along the way. But so next week is going to announce the next rate. We don't know if it's going to go up or if it's going to go down. It seems like since inflation is, we thought we were pulling it back, but then it went up a little bit in August. So we're not sure what the rate's going to be, but this rate is a record. It's the highest rate by far. Yeah. Let's see. One more question, and then we're going to go ahead and move on, but we're keeping a queue of questions. Alex Gailey, if you can help me keep a queue of questions, that would be great. Luke, I got your question. Oh, Yvette, are you limited on how much you can buy?
This is definitely a great question. So you can buy a minimum amount using electronic bonds. So if you're buying electronic bonds, you can buy them in intervals of $25. And the maximum that you can purchase is $10,000 if you're buying them electronically. That means on the TreasuryDirect.gov website. However, you can also use your tax refund to purchase Series I saving bonds, in which if you do that, then you could also purchase an additional $5,000. The Series I bonds, the limit is based on your social security number or your EIN number. If you have a business, you can buy Series I bonds as an adult. You can also buy them for a child who has their own social security number. And you can also buy it for certain business entities.
Amazing. I think it's also an important note here is it's $10,000 per year per social security number or per employer identification number. So some of you have an LLC, some of you have a business, you're a business owner, your business can purchase an I bond as well. All right. And all of those are separate. And so a good example would be, if you want to take the time to set that up, yes, Joe. So each of you can buy 10K. It's per social security number. If you are a family of 2 adults and you have 3 children, you can buy a $10,000 I bond in each social security number. So there's a couple of extra steps there, but you can have a child's Treasury Direct account within your Treasury Direct account. And so you're actually able to purchase for the child as well. So that's what that looks like. Yeah, the business EIN, it also counts. It just has to be some sort of government qualifying number, either a social security number or an EIN. So some of you could double down, even if you're by yourself, but you have an LLC, then you can make that work. We're going to leave lots of time at the end for Q&A. We're going to get every question answered. You know it. Okay, Sol, back to you.
So I love that you all are getting really excited about buying Series I saving bonds. And I want to make sure that you understand that there are certain things that you have in place before you decide to purchase either $25 of Series I bonds, $10,000, $5,000 of Series I bonds, etc. Okay, so one thing is you still want to make sure that you have a fully funded emergency fund in a high yield savings account. As I create posts on my feed, on my Instagram feed, and I share reels, a lot of things people were saying to me were, oh my goodness, I've had all this cash in a high yield savings account for months. Thank you so much for talking about Series I bonds. Now I'm going to take the savings that I have and go to the TreasuryDirect.gov website and buy Series I bonds. And I was like, wait, is that cash your emergency fund? Is that cash meant to cover emergency expenses, a certain amount of your monthly expenses, just in case something unexpected happens? Some people said, no, I'm saving for these other things. But some people said, yeah, it's my emergency fund. We don't want to put our emergency fund in Series I bonds because they're not liquid like a high yield savings account, right? You have to keep your Series I saving bonds a minimum of 12 months. And if you keep them less than 5 years, then you're going to lose the last 3 months of interest. So it's important that you have your cash reserves put aside. Not all money is supposed to make us money in our sleep. Some money is there to just let us sleep peacefully at night because we know that in case of something unexpected, we have cash reserves that we could easily access. The second thing I want you guys to keep in mind is be cautious if you have any debt that is above 6%. Usually I consider high interest debt to be anything above 9%. And I'm not someone who says you can't invest in the stock market if you have debt. I'm not someone who says that. I totally believe it's possible. And in some cases, the right choice to still be investing while you are paying off debt. However, when it comes to Series I bonds, I always want you to be thinking about your net worth. How is your net worth changing based on your financial choices, right? So let's say you decide, all right, I'm going to buy these Series I bonds because I want to have this 9.62% interest rate and I'm going to have it for 6 months. But you have this debt that has a 6% interest rate. Something to keep in mind is, would that money better be used to pay off that debt? At the end, how is your net worth going to change if you're putting your money locked up for 12 months and then also accumulating interest on your debt, right? So I say 6% because Series I bonds have had rates that were as low as 1%. The nice thing about a Series I bonds, they'll never get below 0. You will not lose money from buying Series I bonds. However, if there's ever a rate that is lower than the interest rate that you're paying on your debt, then your net worth is going to be decreasing despite the interest that you're earning on the Series I bonds. And finally, I also need you to make sure that any money that you use to go buy Series I saving bonds, it's money that you are not going to need for at least 12 months. I want you to think specifically, what are the saving goals that you have? NextAdvisor has wonderful articles about how people are using Series I saving bonds. Some people are buying them for their children. Some people are buying them for vacations that they know they're going to take in a few years. They're using it to save to buy a car, and they're wanting to make sure that they get this highest interest rate available. So when should you buy Series I saving bonds? When you already have your emergency fund, when you have a debt payoff plan, but specifically you're not carrying any debt with an interest rate above 6%, and you have specific saving goals that can wait for you to access that money for at least 12 months.
That brings up a great question that came in earlier now that I've gotten myself organized. When it comes to kind of figuring out goal setting and how I-bonds can sort of feed into that. So someone asked, would you recommend getting either a bond or an index fund for someone who is saving for a down payment for a home? I know you partially answered that there, but for that particular scenario, kind of weighing the pros and cons for a really big ticket purchase like either a mortgage or a trip or something else really involved, what factors should someone take into consideration along the way?
This is a great question. And to be completely honest, I want to share my own story. I live in Southern California. The houses in my neighborhood are going for around $1 million. So a down payment is $200,000 in my neighborhood. A few years ago, I decided I was going to put my house down payment savings in a taxable brokerage account. So I started contributing monthly thousands of dollars. And within that taxable brokerage account, I was buying index funds. And it was amazing because the stock market was doing great. And I was like, oh, look, I'm so glad I did this, because in my high yield savings account, I wouldn't have been able to get all this money back. And look, I have $3,000 rate of return on the money that I put into this taxable brokerage account. And then COVID happened and inflation is high, and so the stock market started to crash. Now, I still felt comfortable with the amount of money that I had in the taxable brokerage account because of my living situation, right? I was okay to continue renting for a while. My time horizon for my money was pretty flexible. And I think that's something you need to consider as you decide whether you want to put your money in the stock market in a taxable brokerage account, or whether you want to buy Series I bonds. You need to think about what's your time horizon and what's your tolerance for risk. Because right now, that money that I have in a taxable brokerage account, it is down. I put in $28,000 and I believe the value is $26,000. So I have less money in there than I've put in. My risk tolerance, I'm okay with that. I'm okay continuing to rent. I know eventually the stock markets will go up again. And when they do, I will have more money. But I might need to wait a while. The nice thing about Series I bonds is the value never goes down, and it is a guaranteed rate of return. So you want to think about what's your risk tolerance. Yeah, it's possible, depending on the index funds that you purchase, that you get a higher rate of return than 9.62%. That's possible. But with Series I bonds, the rate that they tell you, it's guaranteed. So you need to reflect on yourself. What do you feel most comfortable with?
In terms of guaranteed rate of return, that kind of segues into another question, and just like even in terms of planning and things like that. Several people have asked this question, so here we go. If I'm going to buy $10,000 in I-bonds and it's at a 9.62% rate, what am I going to have in 6 months?
Okay, I'm going to put the equation into the chat box, and someone is going to pop out their calculator and do the calculation.
I love that you have the equation ready to copy paste.
Okay, that's the equation. $10,000 times 0.0962. Let's see who's calculating it. You could do 10,000 times 9.62%. So you would get $962 for the 6-month period. Now, this is the thing. The 9.62% would be for the entire year. So actually, you take $962 and divide it by 2. because it's only for 6 months.
The reported rate of return is annual, but it's the United States government. So to ensure maximum confusion, you only have that rate for 6 months, but it's an annual rate. Heather has a question. She's asking about, so the previous rate before 9.62, the previous 6 months, everyone was 7.12. So Heather purchased a $1,000 I bond at a 7.12 return, and it didn't return 71.20. She notes that her interest return is 17.60. Any troubleshooting there?
Yeah, you know what? Let me just enter something in the calculator real quick. So her interest rate divided by 2. Okay, so you should have $35.60 after 2 months. Now, considering that it's 17.60, which is $35.60 divided by 2, what I'm wondering is if you didn't get interest for the first 3 months, and if that's not going to be something that's applied to you until after you've held your Series I saving bond for more than 1 year. Well, actually, it would have to be 5 years, because once again, remember that if you sell your Series I saving bonds before 5 years, then you lose 3 months of interest. So that's what I think is going on, Heather, with your account. That you're missing 3 months of interest. So you only got 3 months, which is why you didn't get the full amount.
And for most financial experts, their advice is make it past the first year. That way you don't get the additional penalties. But between the 1 year and the 5 year, if you're going to hold that bond for a long time, because especially now, because the returns are much higher than normal, usually these bonds have rates more like 2 to 4%. Someone asked that question earlier. It's usually much more boring than it is right now. So in terms of thinking about what most financial experts talk about is that taking the hit of losing that last 3 months of interest, if you've been holding the bond for 2 or 3 years, you're still going to come out on top. And so that's what that looks like there. More questions. This is great. All right, let's see. Rose is asking for a clarification. So she's asking, so you should buy Series I bonds. You should consider that as an investment strategy if your only remaining debt is debt that has lower than 6% interest rate. Is that correct? Based on this slide? Yeah. Does I bonds have anything to do with credit score, anything like that? Might it have an impact in any of that?
Doesn't. So let's say that you have a credit score that is below 760, right? I want everyone in this space to be aiming to get a credit score above 760. If you have a credit score below 760, that's not going to impact your ability to buy Series I saving bonds. The only prerequisites is making sure that you have your social security number so that you can access the website and go ahead and purchase them. And then you'll need to link your checking account. It's not related to your credit score. That's a really good question.
Yep. Social security number question follow-up. Someone asked about, can you also purchase an I bond if you have a TIN, a tax identification?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Awesome.
Yes. Yeah, just like you can also invest in certain brokerage firms with a tax identification number as well. So despite your citizen status, that's something that you can consider.
Fantastic. Another question, I see it now, several people, they're like, please answer the question about taxes. Do you have to pay a tax on the interest gained from the I bonds?
Okay, very good question. All right, so when it comes to taxes for Series I saving bonds, just like in your high yield savings account, where you would receive at the end of the year a 1099 interest form, you also are going to have to pay taxes on the interest that's earned on Series I saving bonds. However, there's a choice. You can either pay taxes on that amount annually every year as you report your interest, or wait until you sell your Series I saving bonds. I think that it is a better use of your time to just wait until you sell your Series I saving bonds.
Amazing. And then let's see, a follow-up question on that. Is the interest based on the compounded value? Does that compounded value, does that sit in the bond? And then I'm going to get the new interest rate applied to the compounded bond? Or what does compounding of interest look like, if that's an option at all, in I bond purchasing?
Yeah, so the compounding happens every 6 months. Remember, I was telling you how if you check your balance on TreasuryDirect, the balance of it is going to be a certain amount, but the current value is going to increase based on the added interest that you earn monthly. However, that interest is not added to the balance for 6 months. After those 6 months, once that interest is added to the balance, then you're now getting interest on everything that was in there. Does that make sense?
Yes. So for example, yeah, Joe is like, so it compounds every 6 months, but the full 6-month chunk doesn't come in until the end of the 6-month period. So if I go and drink a beer and then come back tonight and on the Treasury Direct website buy a $10,000 I bond at a 9.62% return, then in April 2023, I'm going to have, since we're doing that divide by 2, I'm going to have $10,481 in my bond in April 2023, because that'll look at a 6-month period. Then let's make up a number about what the next rate will be, 7%, right? Then if I want to leave the money in there, then for the next 6 months, my $10,481 would compound at 7%. And whatever the gains are on that, I would get that in October 2023.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
I'm learning something. Terrific. Naomi asks, when you buy I-bonds, how do you receive this information, particularly regarding the electronic bonds versus in some cases, and I believe it's only with your tax refund that you can buy the paper ones. But if you're going to get a paper I-bond, how are you communicated with? Are you communicated with digitally when you purchase a paper I-bond? Is it truly like a horse with a buggy on it drops it off at your doorstep? Like, what is it? What's the communication like for electronic and for paper?
Yeah. So electronic, you'll find that in your account at the end of the year. You'll find documents about that. If you have paper Series I savings bonds, then you're going to have to report a specific form. I'm not a CPA, I'm not a tax specialist. However, I want to say that the form is like 8888. And that might just be because I'm really into angel numbers right now. And that might be the reason why I memorized that. So there's a specific form that you'll have to file with your tax.
I have one more question related to the debt, student loans. So with what's happening with student loans, for many people, their interest rate is lower than 6% right now, but their interest rate is going to be higher than 6% after January 1st. As someone who has student loans, should they be considering something like an I-bond in order to potentially end up with a net worth gain after a 6-month period? What do you think?
Such a good question. So it really comes down to your personal financial goals and what it is that you're hoping to achieve. For example, you have student loans and you think it's going to take you another 6 years to pay off your student loans. And you know that in those 6 years, you're also going to take a vacation to Mexico or the Dominican Republic. You know you're going to take that vacation, but it's going to be in a few years, then you might still decide to buy Series I savings bonds because you know, like, I'm going to take this vacation anyways. It's going to be more than a year from now. So I might as well also get a little bit of interest. When I'm talking about this debt, it's really because I want you to think very holistically about your financial plan, right? If you have credit card debt or perhaps an auto loan debt, if you make extra payments on that debt, you can pay off that debt sooner. Then I would advocate for you to do that because it's better to accumulate more interest than pay interest on your debt. That's what I'm talking about. But again, there are going to be times that for some of you here, it's just like, hey, you know what? I graduated law school and I have 6 figures in student loan debt. Or, you know, I went and got 2 masters and I am waiting to get student loan forgiveness with the PSLF program, right? The Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program. And you also know that you are going to buy a car or there's going to be something that you're saving for. And if you're going to save for that for at least 12 months, then yeah, then it would make sense for you to go ahead and buy Series I savings bonds. Ideally is that you do get rid of that interest debt that has a high interest above 6% as soon as possible. I want to check in with the group to make sure that that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Several of you are chatting directly to us in the chat. So just know you can also chat to everyone. So some of you are missing the complete party that is happening on our end. Edward asks, this is great. This is a tax question. So Edward says, I pay estimated taxes quarterly. Normally, I never overestimate, so I never have a tax refund. Would it be tax legal to overestimate my quarterly tax by $5,000 so that I get the $5,000 refund back and then use that refund to buy I-bonds?
Edward, I love this question. Yes, you could do that. What you're doing though, in that meantime, right, Every time that we're getting a refund, it's because we're giving the government a 0% interest loan, right? That means that they've had access to our money and now we're getting a refund and they're giving us back. And that means that that money, that refund money, wasn't gaining interest, considering the time of the year, right? Considering that it's October, we have 2 months, there are things that you could adjust to your paycheck in order to get a refund in February, and it's only a few months. I would say that that would be a very financially savvy move, Edward, if you were able to figure that out. Because again, it's not like you're giving the government this 0% interest loan for so long. You're using it specifically for you to then be able to buy 5,000 Serie I bonds.
I love it. Should we go back to the deck? Because we're having a complete party right now. I know there's like about 25 or 30 questions in the queue. We'll figure out a way to get all your questions answered, but I know that you've prepared some other slides. Okay, so we're going to beast through the slides. There's only a few left, everyone. And then we're going to use the remaining time for Q&A.
Okay, so where to buy Serie I saving bonds? I was so surprised to see this. The TreasuryDirect got a makeover. This is what the website looks like now. For those of you who were familiar with the TreasuryDirect website before, and I know some of you were because we were talking about it in the chat, to log in before, it was like a crazy thing. But also some aspects of it are still pretty archaic.
That came up in the chat that apparently the government's so excited they've done about 3 pages. So if you suddenly get transported back to 1997 during your I-bond purchasing experience, know that other people are experiencing that too.
I think what's most important is I want to make sure that everyone knows this is a government website. I know that sometimes, especially with the old website, I had clients that are like, is this where I buy Serie I saving bonds? And I was like, yeah, it's legit. It is legit. And so I think they're slowly making it over. So key things here is that you would open up a new account if you don't currently own any Serie I saving bonds. And you can see here what that process is going to look like, the information that you're going to need. You'll notice here the social security number or the EIN. Again, you can use the taxpayer identification number and choose the following to set up your password and your security questions. Notice here you cannot buy paper saving bonds here, but it will provide you with instructions. The website, it does have various tutorial videos. So once you open up your account, you can watch videos on here that show you what the process is going to look like. You buy your Serie I saving bonds, you would connect your checking account, purchase your Serie I saving bonds, and then that's it. Something I want you all to keep in mind too is that I personally think it's best to buy Serie I saving bonds in big amounts. So for example, I have a client who is buying Serie I saving bonds for her house down payment. She is purchasing those Serie I bonds every time she has $5,000 ready to buy Serie I bonds. And the reason being is because if she purchases the $5,000 in January of 2022, right, she cannot access that $5,000 again until January 2023. If she were buying them poco a poco, just little by little each month, and saying she was like, oh, $500 in January, $500 in February, $500 in March, then that means that she's going to have to wait a year before she gets access to selling the 500 Serie I bonds that she bought in January. So I think it's best to always think about lump sums, especially if it's a vacation, right? So you put $2,000 because you know your vacation is going to be $2,000. Even if you plan to max out the $10,000, making sure that you do it in some larger intervals so that you know that when you can access your money, you're going to have access to that money in large intervals again. Again, what your specific saving goals are for Serie I bonds is also going to influence what the increments are. If you know, like, hey, you know what, I'm going to buy these Serie I saving bonds and I'm going to keep them for the life of the bond, which is 30 years, then hey, you might decide to do $50 at a time. Or if you're choosing to buy them for a child, right? You might think like, hey, you know what, my kid's birthday money, I'm going to buy Serie I saving bonds with that money. Or for a holiday, I'm going to buy a niece or a nephew some Serie I saving bonds. Then also you might decide to do a smaller amount. So this is what the website looks like. Again, we just wanted to make sure that you were familiar with it. If you are buying Serie I saving bonds for a child, you need to have your own account first, and the child's account needs to be linked to the adult. Something to keep in mind is that at 18 years old, that account becomes the child's account. Okay, the parent will no longer have access to that money. So making sure that whatever you buy in Series I savings bonds, you're ready to really give that to your child at 18 years old. Let's say you want to buy them for a godchild or a niece or nephew, someone that isn't your own child. You need to make sure that the parent has an account so that the child's account can be linked to the parent's. Questions here? I imagine we're getting questions in this section.
Thank you for speaking, buying for children, buying for other people's children. If you're buying for someone else's child, do you need a TreasuryDirect account as well?
Yes, you do. Because what you're doing when you go in and purchase it, you're going to say that you're buying it as a gift. And something else to keep in mind, because I know you guys like asking tax questions, is that the person responsible for paying for the taxes is whoever holds the bond. So that means a child could also be responsible for paying the taxes. That means if you're buying it for a child. And again, like I said earlier, waiting until you actually sell the Series I savings bonds would be the better time to pay the taxes instead of having to report it every single year.
Love it. I'm holding questions. We can burn through this deck. And then I've got a big old bag full of them ready for you.
Oh, I'm ready then. I'm ready. Like we discussed, I really wanted to use this time to make sure that you all were able to ask questions and that your specific questions were answered. So let's talk.
I love it. Melissa asked, just real quick add-on while we're still talking about the kids, do the parents have to buy a bond in order for the child to purchase theirs? So I think for clarity, Melissa, maybe rephrase your question a little bit. So you could have a TreasuryDirect account and not have any bonds. And then you could buy bond, you could just gift. I know you have a client who did that, like a savings bond for their kid. And so for like birthdays and stuff, she got all her friends
client
to have a
actually
party.
That client is somebody who set up her account, was still working on paying off debt. So she wasn't buying Series I savings bonds for herself, but she did include in her budget a certain amount that she wanted to put away for her child. There's many different ways that you can build wealth for your children. This was something that was important to her. So I said, you know what, if it's important to you, then do it, right? At the end of the day, personal finance is personal. You're going to decide what's best for you. But yes, she did not have to have any money in her TreasuryDirect.gov account. And the child did have more money. She would joke about it. She would say, my kid has more money in Series I bonds than I do. And I said, so far. But as soon as we pay off that debt and you max out that Roth IRA, then you can buy your Series I savings bonds too.
Love it. I'm going through the Q&A off the Q&A button. So the question was, does it matter when you buy over the course of the month? Does it matter? Do you buy at the beginning of the month, the end of the month? Is that going to make a difference in the month of October, for example?
It doesn't matter. Ultimately, when it matters is within the 6 months, right? It's about buying and getting a specific type of interest rate. No matter what day in the month you buy it, you're still going to get that same interest rate, which is different, right? It's different than if you were buying stocks or ETFs because the prices can change on a daily basis.
Love it. Can you purchase I-bonds if you're a corporation with 2 or more shareholders?
Very good question. Let's check the TreasuryDirect.gov website.
Imagine you could, because it's just going to go off of EIN, right? How they determine a specific user. It's like 1 bond per social security number or 1 bond per employer identification number. So you could have 50 shareholders in your company, but your company has 1.
Well, no, see, that's the thing that I want to make sure to verify that, especially since we're recording this.
No fake news at NextAdvisor.
Yeah. But look, this is like a good way, right? Because as you get questions, I also want to model for you how you could answer those questions for yourself too. And I think that's important. We're blessed to live in this age where we have access to all of this technology. So who can buy Series I bonds? If I Google that, look, I'm going straight to TreasuryDirect.gov website. And they've changed the website a little, which is a little harder for me to see.
I'm glad you didn't have any screenshots from the old website because they're gone now, I guess.
Yeah, totally, right? Okay, oh, look, I was not lying. Remember I said earlier that you would need a form 8888 to buy paper Series I savings bonds to report the taxes? See, that number stayed in my head. Okay, I can't find this right here. Maybe Alex has something that you could look up for us because it's not here on this specific website. Like, I know there's certain things, like if you're a sole proprietor, then yes, then you can buy it. I wonder if you're an S Corp, you can also buy it. So I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that question straight at my tips, and I don't want to say something because there are certain business identities that cannot buy Series A saving bonds. That is possible.
Noted. Can someone with an O1 visa buy I bonds?
Does this person have a tax identification number? If you do, then yes.
So it just comes down to TIN or no TIN. If you don't have a social security
TIN.
number, but you do have a TIN, then you can still get it regardless of the visa or not. Amazing. Let's see, other questions in the chat. A couple people have asked about this. The process of selling the bond. Can you talk through that for us?
Okay, so again, you have to wait at least 12 months. If you sell it before 5 years, you're going to lose 3 months of interest. At that point, you say that you cash it out. You cash it out. The money then stays in the account, I want to say for 3 business days before it's then transferred to your checking account. Simple.
Amazing. And you can use either a checking account or a savings account to fund the bond and then receive that money back. That's correct, right?
You know, I've only used the checking account. All my clients have only used the checking account. So I would have to check to see if a savings account is also available.
Got it. And then one other question related to that is, what if you change banks in the middle?
You can always just update your information on the website.
Got it.
And we do have somebody here in the chat saying that you can link a savings account to your Series A saving bonds.
Amazing. Awesome. Last call for questions because we're almost at the hour. And thank you, Alex. While we're waiting for questions to come in, Sol, why don't you plug yourself a little bit? Where can people find you? Isn't she amazing, everyone? Listen to you talk all day. Where can people find you if they want to continue to follow you after this?
All right. I am on Instagram at Wealth para Todos. I am also on LinkedIn. And I have a weekly newsletter. I have my website. I would definitely say get on my newsletter. I talk a lot about building wealth, again, honoring your wellness, investing in your wholeness. I want to see you taking as much joy investing your money as you do spending your money. And sometimes people struggle with enjoying spending their money. So I want that for all of you, okay? So yes, I hope that you'll join my email list. I am launching a membership program, Wealth para Todos Academy, where you will have access to monthly workshops, financial literacy workshops. We do group thought work, coaching. I also have you track your expenses and make sure that you make progress on a financial goal. Anyone who's part of the membership, the goal is that you either invest $10,000 in 2023, save $10,000, pay off $10,000 of debt, or also spend $10,000 in self-care activities, or a combination of all 4. So if you're interested in that, make sure you check out my Instagram stories. There's always a link there telling people to get information about my membership. But back to these questions, okay? So another thing that, earlier when we were talking about taxes, I want you to know that if you use your Series I saving bonds for educational purposes, you do not have to pay taxes. Another thing you want to know is that you do not have to pay state or local taxes on the interest earned on your Series I saving bonds, but you do have to pay federal tax.
How long can we hold the bond?
It matures after 30 years. So you could hold it on for 30 years.
30 years. Fantastic. So you can do up to $15,000 in a year, everyone, right? So it's $10,000 digital, $5,000 paper. Is that in sequence, Sol? Do you have to get all the digital ones first before you get the paper ones?
No.
Could you just get paper? You can do them in any permutation.
You can buy them at any time, right? There's also some questions in the Q&A box. Frank here asks, as a grandfather, could he buy I bonds for his grandchildren under his social security number and keep them for them in his account? Yeah, I think about my godchild. My godchild was like, hey, here's $1,000 that I saved. They are 15 years old. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I want you to invest it. And I put it in taxable brokerage account under my name. I could have used a different account. I could have set it up in my godchild's account. But I said, you know what? I'll pay the taxes on it. And I just allowed my godchild to do that using my social security number, right? So it's the same thing. Like as the grandfather, you would buy the Series I saving bonds in your account. And then you just know, oh, but that's really money that I have for my grandchildren. And that's fine too. Just know that when you do sell those bonds, you're going to be the one responsible for paying the interest.
Amazing. We're going to take one more question and then we'll be at the hour. I think this is a great one. Can I buy $10,000 and then be gifted other money, gifted another $10,000?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So the limit is going to be by social security number. So no, you cannot buy $10,000 for yourself and then also receive $10,000 in the same fiscal year, in the same tax year. Now, if it's 2022, you take $10,000 and then someone gifts you $10,000 January 2023, then that's fine. But then that means you can't buy Series I savings bonds in 2023.
Fantastic. I know we had a couple more questions. We'll be able to get back to you all via in the chat and email follow-up and all of that stuff. But we are at the hour. I want to value everyone's time, especially on the East Coast, being here in the evening. Thank you so much. Rita-Soledad, thank you so much. This was an awesome session. I learned so much, still so much to learn about I-bonds.
Thank you everybody for showing up. Remember, you learned something, teach somebody else, keep talking dinero. Thank you, NextAdvisor, for having me. Nick, it's always a pleasure to work with you, and everyone at NextAdvisor. Make sure that you are on their newsletter list. You're following them on Instagram, because they really make sure to give you information from diverse voices.
Love it. And we haven't done a webinar in a long time, y'all, and we want to get back into doing them on a more regular basis. And so if you had a good experience tonight, if you learned something, I'd love to hear about it. My email is nick@nextadvisor.com. I'd love to hear what you got out of the session, any feedback. At NextAdvisor, we call it start, stop, continue. Like, what would you like us to start doing, stop doing, continue doing, anything like that? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear ideas on future sessions. What would be of value to you? You can also reach out to Alex Gailey. She writes Next Weekly, the weekly newsletter, alex@nextadvisor.com. Please connect with us, and we can't wait to connect with you. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic evening. Talk soon.